I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along. Today is Friday, January 17th. This week, we're celebrating the life and work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Also, this week, preparing for the inauguration of Donald Trump as the next president of the United States. Also, this week here in Minnesota, we're feeling the mid winter thaw, 2 days of nice weather meaning 30 degrees or so today. But we know that in a couple of days, we'll be back to 14, 15 below. So it's a couple of days of respite of that we have to enjoy and can enjoy. Listen, no matter where you are, we appreciate you connecting with the program. We stream this program live on YouTube. We also stream it on Twitter, Facebook, and on LinkedIn. And some people are watching the show, if not live, watching later on Narrative. Narrative is KNARRATIVE.com. It's a Africana focused platform that is rich and wonderful, and we're pleased to be part of that as well. No matter where you are, we treasure you, we value you, we want you to be part of this journey of conversation and journey of engagement. Today's program, this is Friday. We call this the Healing Circle, and it features my colleagues, Dr. Bravada Garrett Akinsanya, who's the leader at the African American Child Wellness Institute, and her colleague, my colleague, Dr. Oliver Williams, will be joining us as well, who is Professor Williams of Sociology Department, University of Minnesota, retired. Just a wonderful and well-traveled and super engaged human being, a great individual. Today, we're going to be joined by Dr. Mary Hyde, who does research and work about accountability engagement for the AmeriCorps organization. She's Director of Research and Evaluation for AmeriCorps. We'll talk about that, find out what that organization is, what it does, what does it mean to direct the research and evaluation effort there, and talk about what engagement looks like, particularly right now in the days ahead. We begin the program every week with a meditation. We set the intention of the program, and I invite Dr. B to come on board and sort of get us started. Dr. B, how you doing, my friend?
I'm fine. Happy New Year to everyone. And I'm really excited about being here. So happy to see that Dr. Hyde is joining us. Today, as we start with the circle, as we always do, we use this virtual circle as African people use circle in process. And when we use the circle, there is no beginning, no end, no top or bottom. Everyone in the circle has equal access to a space of power, which is the center of the circle. And in this sacred space, we stop for a moment just to breathe, look to our left and our right, noticing that we are safe, looking behind us, knowing that we are safe, and be present, just present in this moment as we inhale peace and exhale anxiety. Inhale peace and exhale anxiety. In this sacred space, we honor our elders because we stand on their shoulders. And in this honoring, we honor our ancestors who were the shoulders on which our elders and we stand. And we also honor our elders, our ancestors, and everything around us. And we honor our ancestors because they're closest to the Creator. So in this circle, there's no beginning or end. And we welcome everyone. Whenever you get here, there's a space in this healing circle for you. And today we say Ashe. And we, in this circle, we also use a virtual talking stick so that whoever's holding the talking stick has to circle has the center of the circle and has voice. So today, as we pass this virtual talking stick around, we invite our audience, those in the presence of this wonderful gathering, to join in any way through chat or whatever you need to do to let us know your thoughts and your feelings. And with that, we pass it on to Baba Al. Here you go. Talking stick to you.
I'll take the stick back. Thank you so much. Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest today. That is Dr. Mary Hyde. As I mentioned earlier, she's the Director of Research and Evaluation at AmeriCorps. And we want to dive into the latest findings from the Civic Engagement and Volunteering Survey, which explored the vital role of volunteering in building healthier communities. And we want to examine how civic engagement contributes to mental health and overall well-being. Hopefully, she'll share with us how AmeriCorps as an organization fosters a culture of service and help us all discover ways we can make meaningful differences in our communities. Dr. Hyde, welcome to the conversation, and I'm going to pass the talking stick to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And Dr. B, thank you for that. Welcome. I started my day with yoga today, and I wasn't ready for such a peaceful final meeting of my day. So thank you so much. And as Mr. McFarlane said, I am the director of the Office of Research and Evaluation at AmeriCorps. And for those in the audience who may not be familiar with our agency, our central mission is to improve individual and community life through civic engagement. And we try to create opportunities for all Americans to serve in our programs and to volunteer in their community. Also, as Mr. McFarlane said, we have sponsored this survey, and some of the findings that I'm pleased to share with you all today come from this survey that we have been working on with the U.S. Census since 2002. And it really is the cornerstone of our research on civic engagement and volunteering and service in this country. And we have 2023 findings. This is something that we administer every other year. And so we track a lot of dimensions of how people can engage in their community, participate in their community, contribute to the common good. But I'm going to focus on a few things today. And that is formal volunteering, which is volunteering through an organization like a nonprofit or a faith-based organization or even a municipal government organization. I'm going to talk a little bit about virtual volunteering. We have a first ever measure of virtual volunteering. One of the positive things we were able to learn out of COVID is how we can pivot in times like that and still contribute to the health of our communities. And I also want to talk a little bit about informal helping. While we've been talking about these findings from this survey as an agency for a few decades, I feel that we have not always lifted up informal helping in the way that we should. So I really want to talk about the value of that. Just to share a few stats with you all, which feels a little out of place in such a peaceful place, but I'm going to share them anyway. In 2023, what we found was that formal volunteering increased, right? So 28% of all Americans formally volunteer through an organization in their community. That translates to about 75.7 million Americans who showed up and tried to contribute something to an organization in their community. Together, that represents almost 5 billion worth of hours in terms of time that people donated. And that translates to an economic value of about 167.2 billion. So time matters in terms of helping organizations in your local community advance their mission. We know that some of these organizations don't have all of the resources they want. So if you can show up and give your time, it really matters and it translates into dollars. As I mentioned, we measured for the first time virtual volunteering with this survey. That was an opportunity because people couldn't always come out, obviously, when we were all in lockdown. Those who wanted to formally volunteer with an organization, most still did in person. 80% of folks still did it mainly in person. But about 1 in 5, because of the flexibility of many of the organizations that host volunteers, we're able to do so in either a hybrid fashion or completely virtually. And that created additional opportunities for people to keep giving. I also mentioned that I want to talk about informal helping. So informal helping is also robust in this country. In 2023, 54% of Americans reported helping their neighbors in some way. They didn't necessarily come up to an organization and formally do that, but they looked out for their neighbors. They helped their neighbors. They were engaged in their community in positive ways. 54%, that's 137 million Americans that continue to show up for their neighbors in their community every day. This was also a big percentage increase, right? So formal volunteering went up 5 percentage points between 2021 and 2023. Informal helping increased 3 percentage points. That's statistically significant, but also meaningfully significant. That's in another almost 13 million people who are informally helping. So I'll stop there and see if there's any additional questions, but that just sort of frames up. People are still showing up. Civic health in America is vibrant. There are ways to keep coming in and showing up for your community.
A wonderful introduction, and thank you so much, Dr. Hyde. You know, what are some of the big trends? And we come at this program from an Afrocentric point of view, looking at well-being of African people, of the Africana sensibility. What trends show up in your research that you can attribute to, or that distinguish or not distinguish the African culture in the realm of volunteerism?
I don't have at the top of my head statistics for the African community, but I will say this. Across all of the demographic characteristics that we do track, I do know that both formal volunteering and informal helping is on the rise, right? Since 2021, between 2021 and 2023, across all demographic groups. I will say that what is a consistent trend, women formally volunteer more than men. That's very consistent over the decades. Parents with children under the age of 18 living in their homes consistently volunteer more than households without parents of children under 18. The same is true for informal helping. Parents with children under 18 are informally helping at higher rates than households without young children. I will say that generationally, Generation X showing up, they are consistently volunteering in organizations at a higher rate than any other generation that we track. In terms of informal helping, it's the baby boomers that are showing up, right? They're showing up and they're helping their neighbors. They have the highest rates of informal helping of any other generational demographic group. I will say also for informal helping, veterans are helping their neighbors in informal ways more than non-veterans. So there are some very consistent patterns of who is showing up to volunteer informally or formally. In the virtual space, we also saw that older people were more likely to choose the option of formally volunteering either virtually or in a hybrid fashion. What was interesting and surprising to us as well is that more people who said they virtually volunteered reported living with a disability than those who showed up in person, which is exciting because it both kind of dispels what can be a stereotype against older Americans who, you know, they can't log onto their lap. No, they showed up. They were older folks. So this is another way to create opportunities for folks to contribute to their community. Those living with a disability, this can be a way to remove a barrier, right? So this also increases access. So I do have those demographics sort of off the top of my head. I would also maybe want to circle back, although this is not necessarily centric to the African community. I want to talk about informal volunteering as an important way to highlight all the ways in which people can contribute to civic life and to the social fabric of their community. I think informal helping is important because I think that communities vary in terms of the opportunity to volunteer. Not every community has the same infrastructure, if you will, of nonprofits or, you know, those sort of formal organizations. They're not distributed equally, right? I think even organizations within different communities have different levels of resources. So that may limit the ability to invite everyone in to volunteer in that fashion or to contribute to community life in that fashion. I would say that also there's differences across communities around who is invited, right? So I think it's important to talk about the ways in which people are strengthening their community every day in every way because it's what they do. And it may not be captured in this one type of way of talking about civic life. but it's a very important dimension. And I think it is more inclusive of ways in which all communities are healthy and vibrant and can be healthy and vibrant, even if there are differences in opportunities or invitations to come into more traditional types of way to volunteer and contribute to civic life.
I have a question. Thank you for that. All the time that you've talked about these wonderful numbers in terms of people volunteering, I started thinking about what kind of barriers that our community members face. And you've touched on that a little bit. I'm just wondering, I hear people saying things like, oh, I don't have time to volunteer, or, oh, I can't volunteer. I can barely take care of myself. What am I doing trying to help somebody else? So that mentality, I see that more often than not. Maybe it's because I'm doing therapy sessions and that's where I see people. But the issue is I see that quite often. What is your take on how to approach people who have that, I don't want to say excuse, but explanation for why they're less involved?
Look, I think that's very real. And I think that, again, that's why I think it's important to encourage people to recognize what they're already doing, right? So maybe you don't have time to give a day at the food pantry. Maybe you don't have time to go to your child's school and show up for snacks or what have you, because you're taking care of other children, or you're taking care of your parents, or you're working several jobs, or your shift is not in line with where the opportunities to show up are. So I think that, one, I would like people to take a look at their life and see how they're helping people every day, and feel good that that is also a way that you're contributing to your community life. So, for validation, instead of shaming yourself, perhaps. I would say also that you can volunteer for an hour a month and it still matters, right? So I think we'll get to this maybe a little bit later in the conversation, but we as an organization try to encourage people to even just come out for a day of service. We're about to celebrate Martin Luther King on Monday. Just come out for the day. Come out for an hour. It gives you a taste. It gives you an opportunity to see how rewarding it can be. It might feel like you don't have time, but trust me, volunteering and serving is as transformative for the person showing up as the people that you're serving. It allows you to connect to other people. It allows you to connect to perhaps an issue that matters to you. Come out to a cleanup in your community. It doesn't have to be a full-time commitment. It doesn't have to be every Saturday. Try it once, just once on a special day, whether it's MLK Day, whether it's 9/11, whether it's, a different holiday that you celebrate for whatever, your faith or your passion might be. Just give it a try, but also maybe reflect and think about ways that you're already contributing and know that it matters.
That's
I love that.
that's great. Actually, I pulled up through AI. I raised the question about Black philanthropy. Before I share what I came up with, let me ask you to talk about the similarity or distinction between philanthropy and and civic engagement or volunteering. I mean, they are adjacent. Sometimes they're the same, but sometimes they're not. How would you describe the differences in the concept of philanthropy versus the concept of volunteerism?
Well, I think one perhaps is about giving money and one is about giving time. That's how I sort of just, generally distinguish it. One of the things that we measure as part of civic engagement is charitable donations, right? Like charitable giving is an actual way and an important way that we contribute to civic life. And I think philanthropy creates an important infrastructure and supports a lot of organizations to advance their mission that is, focused on improving community life. And I think it is in the same ecosystem, if you will. It's all part of the same landscape. So it is, I would, in my opinion, say that philanthropy can be the backbone of a sort of system of opportunities where you can show up and volunteer your time, which is more about of your time. So charitable giving, volunteering your time. Again, though, I think that it's one of many ways in which a community can increase its capacity and in ways that individuals can show up.
Let me share what I came up with when I did the AI search on Google. It says Black philanthropy is a vital part of the Black community and includes giving time, as you said, talent, and treasure to improve the lives of others. Black philanthropy has played a key role in establishing Black schools, banks, and businesses. Why is Black philanthropy important? The bullet points are that Black households donate more of their income than white households. It's important to say that because people presume that the philanthropic spirit is greater, grander in the general population and less in the Black population because Black people have less. But the facts reveal that Black households nonetheless donate more of their income than white households. Next bullet point was that Black Americans are more likely to give to strangers in need. Interesting. Yeah. And then finally, the note that philanthropy, as you said, Dr. Hyde, can help build stronger communities. Finally, how does Black philanthropy take place? Well, giving through the Black church. Many Black donors give their faith organization or faith institution, give because of their faith, number one. And then also family tradition, that many Black donors give to support their heritage and tradition. And finally, trust. Many Black donors give because they trust the person asking. And so this is about philanthropy, donating obviously we're talking about dollars here, but it started off saying that the giving could be of time as well. So I think that's interesting. And why it's interesting for me right now is because we're kind of at a watershed moment in the country. We always are, but it feels even more so today with the inauguration of Donald Trump as the next president, and with the angst and the anxiety that was associated with the campaign and the results, where a certain number of Americans may feel vindicated because their position prevailed in the outcome of the elections, and a certain number of us are skeptical and are concerned about what this means about the soul of the country, and whether there is reason to fear that the intention of the voice of the conservative or the ultra-right is to really repeat what happened after the end of the Civil War, the emancipation of those who were enslaved. And there was that brief period of expansion, of growth, of prosperity, of movement, and of opportunity and hope that came crashing to a halt around political compromise and political shenanigans and cultural, I can't think of the right words for it, but a lot of bad stuff happened that put Black people back in de facto slavery after Reconstruction. So we are having that conversation in this community about where our country is right now. Given that, how do we, Dr. B, encourage our people to stay engaged, and why is this conversation about connecting in community so important and so timely? Dr. B, I'm going to hand the talking stick to you and talk about our experience, our culture.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, as Dr. Hyde was speaking a little bit earlier, I was thinking about when we volunteer and how we volunteer, like you said, at church. So at the workplace, we may be the janitor, but at church, we may be the chair of the deacon board. So when we go to various entities in our community, we are recognized not for just what we do, but who we are. And so I have found, and I heard her talking about the volunteering, it's volunteering and civic engagement, and what we need as a people to latch into that. And I think one of them is to feel like we belong. And earlier I heard her say something about, it was about belonging. It was about mattering. And that even when you give 1 hour, it's worth something. It's of value. And for us, that difficulty has arisen because there's so many environments where we don't feel valued. And
Dr. B, let me jump in, Dr. B, for a second and ask Dr. Hyde to respond to that, because she's got to leave in a couple of minutes.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. I thought I had more time, but I just got a ping that I need
no.
It's okay. I know. I'm sorry.
But I want to have you come back. We can't we're going to let you go now. But
I'm happy to come back.
But take a couple of minutes, as much time as you have before you have to leave, Dr. Hyde, just to
Oh,
respond.
yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt what you were saying, Dr. B.
And we didn't get a chance for you to talk about AmeriCorps, so put that in this closing statement as well.
Yeah.
Sure. I appreciate that, the conversation around where people are showing up. And there was a time when this survey tracked a little bit more in detail where people were actually spending their time. And it truly was, when we were tracking those sort of breakouts, they were in the schools and they were in their faith-based organizations. That's where people are really showing up and shining for secular and non-secular reasons. Right. So I would just want to encourage folks who are thinking about ways that they might, look for an opportunity in their community and are not sure how. There is Serve Minnesota. Every one of the states in the country has sort of a hub where you can learn about volunteer opportunities, right? So in Minnesota, that is Serve Minnesota. You can also, of course, come to our website at AmeriCorps.gov. Look for volunteer opportunities if you aren't sure where to begin. And that includes anything from a day of service to an hour of service to a more sustained type of commitment. So we have a number of programs that you can do that in. And I would just say in Minnesota, between January of 2023 and January of 2024, you all had about 15,000 folks who showed up to volunteer in an organization in about 2,300 service sites across the state. So AmeriCorps has a presence in Minnesota. Minnesota is ahead of the game. You guys are volunteering at 40% of your population compared to the national rate of 28%. So, and you have 63% of your residents who are informally helping compared to the 54% national rate. So you guys are doing it. So anyway, I'll leave with that. I encourage you to check out, our website, check out Serve Minnesota. Minnesota's ranked number 3 in terms of formal volunteering. So you guys have figured it out, and I would love to come back at some point.
We'd love to have you back as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. What a wonderful conversation. A good way to start. We're just reigniting our season here. This is our first live show in 2025. So thank you for being part of that.
Oh, I'm so glad I was part of the first one. Please invite me back.
Okay, we will. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Dr. B, let's you and I continue. And I interrupted you just to make sure we had a chance to get those comments from Dr. Hyde. But go ahead on the thought that you were laying out before. Unmute, please.
Yeah, I think it's because one of the reasons we don't volunteer is because, again, that we don't feel valued. But I always like to use this analogy. I was at a training one time, and the man picked up this crisp new $20 bill, and he held it up, and he says, how much is this worth? And everybody was saying $20. He said, would anybody like this to be given this $20? And of course, everybody had their hand up. Then he took the $20 bill, he crumbled stuff on it, he made it, wrinkled it up, he put it on the ground, he put his foot on it and smashed it around, and then he picked up the $20 bill and he said, how much is this worth now? Everybody said still $20. Anybody value $20? And everybody said they still did. So I think that's a great analogy of we as a people. We go through a lot. We get scrambled up. We get dirt on us. We get piled on, but we never lose our value. And nobody can take it away because it was given to us by the Creator. And if they didn't give it to you, they can't take it. So I like to, if we begin to talk about volunteering in our space, you come from a space of having, a place of having plenty. And we as an African people who they say the Garden of Eden was in Africa. If we serve as the birthplace for humankind, from that we learn generosity. We learn that people in our family don't have to look like us. They don't even have to talk like us. They're still connected to us. So that concept of consubstantiation and all living things created are a value. That concept of I am because we are. And we are because I am talks about our place within that system. So if we teach it, if we remind ourselves and go from that colonial amnesia state that was imposed on us as a people, then we can heal ourselves. We can reclaim our sense of humanity. So, and I think doing volunteering and finding something of value that you see and you want to support is a way of celebrating your humanity and your connection to all things and all people. So,
How daunting an experience do you expect we're going to have, if at all, given the change in the administration? I said something earlier about a sense of unease or apprehension or anxiety. What is it going to mean, and what are the MAGA crowd being authorized to do and say? And how will that show up in our neighborhoods and how we walk past people on the street, how we go to the grocery store or department store and we find service? Will it be the same? Will it be good? Will we find contempt, disdain, in the sense that it reminded us of how things used to be? What do you mean, Al? I mean that my wife talks about growing up in Crystal Springs, Mississippi, and going with her grandmother to the local town store, and remembering without having been told it, but absorbing the feeling because the culture produced it, that when she went into a store and she accidentally bumped into an 8-year-old child, same age as her, but she felt mortal fear.
yeah,
She felt that her, and hadn't had a discussion, but she knew that that could have a consequence that was, uh, you know, mortal, could be a mortal consequence. And so that's part of our DNA, our history, our story. And I think we not cannot unremember
that's
those experiences and those stories. Now, maybe the younger people, the newer generations, are free from that baggage if they haven't experienced it.
right.
But the question is, will they experience it and will they understand what's happening if something like that happens again? So the question is, what did the newly emancipated Africans feel in 1880, 1890, 1900, as they spread out through the country, building cities, building towns, building communities, demonstrating the capacity to create paradise in their relationships with each other and in their ability to serve each other and to serve their creator in the sense and the spirit of physical and economic community? What did they feel? And what happened? How did they experience the gutting of that bid for freedom and emancipation? What do you think?
Oh, those are very deep thoughts. Of course, coming from you, I'm not surprised. But but I think as a psychologist, I think about human behavior and human nature. And I think about all the multiple studies in our field that lend evidence to how we became damaged and how we can become healed.
Mm.
And one of the more um, I guess I want to say popular but well understood constructs is one called learned helplessness, where this Dr. Seligman had a dog in a cage where on one side of the cage he would be shocked every 20 seconds. And to escape the shock, he would push a lever and the door would come up and he'd run over to the other side. Now, when he ran to the other side, not only was he safe from the shock, but there are nice treats, food treats. So he'd get there, but what happened to that environment? He'd be there a little bit and shock would start. So he'd hit the lever and run back to the other side and back and forth, back and forth. And what we found is that at one day when the door got stuck and he was getting shocked, the door got stuck. He kept hitting the lever, but the lever never came up.
Hmm.
And so he tried and tried, and eventually he just stopped trying. And when the man came back, the researcher, to resume the trials, what happened to the poor dog is he didn't know the door was open. He didn't try to open the door. The man opened up the door so he could see that he could get over to the other side. He still didn't try. So people had learned to be helpless. And in so many of the societal pieces that we engage it with, because of the infrastructure and structural development of those groups, we haven't been able to push the lever and the door open. And when they push it and the door opens, we think, it's not going to be treats over there. It's just going to be more shock. So we don't engage and we don't take risk. But the good thing about the study is that later he learned the idea of not just learned helplessness, but learned optimism. So now we know that we can teach optimism. So when that door is up, we can say in our heads, our self-talk would be, yeah, it's up, but you know what? I can go over and there's going to be some treats. If not, eventually I will get a treat. Or even better, when the door is stuck, we'll say, I'll knock the dang thing down. I'm getting out of here. I'm not sticking here. So our Black mamas and daddies and aunties and uncles, they taught us how to not just survive, but thrive. And even though our DNA holds that traumatic history, even though our environment around us says you're not welcome, you don't belong, I'm going to send you back to Africa where you came from, or whatever it is that we're feeling with Trump being the president, we have that resilience and we know how to knock that door down. We've learned how to push that lever to escape. And if we haven't learned it, we need to look at our elders who have. That's my answer to your question.
Right. Thank you. So it opens another question, and that is, the election is here. It's number one, but we're also looking at these fires in California right now. Yeah. And I've talked to a couple of relatives who live there, were not directly impacted, but they are in the area. I'm thinking that in the next couple of weeks, we should do a show where we talk to people who are directly impacted by the fire. Yeah. One of the areas that we've learned about is the community that was historically a Black community. What's it called? The not Palisades, but the other community. The name will come back to me in a second. Where it's a historic, multi-generational Black community of people that left out of Texas and Mississippi that went to California and created community. It's the name will come to me. If somebody is listening in the chat, help me out here.
Yeah, I don't know it.
Yeah, I do know. So, but a stable, multi-generational Black community is at risk of being obliterated. Much of it has been already by the fire in LA, and more of it is at risk. And as I kind of watch the news, my mind takes me back to the stories of Rosewood and the stories of Tulsa, where there was intentional destruction of Black communities. And this might be an act of nature or not. We don't know why these fires were started. But what happens when we have built something that sustained itself over a long period of time, and for whatever reason, it's wiped out? How do people deal with that trauma? And what is our obligation as Americans, as Black people, to both be aware, to if we can, be supportive to those families like ours that are now, besieged by doubt and trauma from the fires? What do you think?
Well, to me, that goes to another whole piece where we talk about racism. And we talk about how we overcome it or deal with it. See, the racism that could be playing out in California would not be that there's not the same people are the same. They have the resilience. They have the desire to survive. They want everybody in their communities to survive. But is your community one that is devoid or depleted of fire hydrants? Or is your community one that, the infrastructural is so old that it blows up like a flame because and gets burnt quicker because of the materials that were used to make it? Is your community one that they're slow to come to when there's a gunshot, slow to come to when the fire department is called? So all of those structural barriers, they don't look racist if
Mhm.
you're not looking for the disparate treatment that happens in one community versus another. Rich people, their houses are burning down. Poor people's houses are burning down. But the issue is what kind of rescue, what kind of support is being laid out for both groups? And is there equity in that access to resources? So that's one piece of it. The second piece is that we're talking now about a community who it took a lot of energy, a lot of coordination, and many, 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 many years of sacrifice to build what they had. Unlike what would be seen maybe in a more affluent community where they're paying a lot of money and they've got the water and they've got the other things, but the things that happen when you're in a community where your value is minimized or marginalized is that you have to learn how to overcome that or not internalize their behavior as something you own. You can't pretend or believe that because they don't come see us or help us, that means we're less than other people. We can't internalize that. So right now, I think people are traumatized and triggered by past traumas, even if it's Rodney King, past traumas where the help was needed, but the health wasn't there. And they have multiple examples in California and in other states where help was needed and it didn't come.
Just pulled up a story that's on CBS News online. It says the Eaton Fire. That's the community. I think the bigger community is Altadena. I couldn't think of the name
Okay.
before. But let me just share a little of this story. It says that um, Maya Richard Craven describes herself as 5 generations Pasadena because her family planted roots in the area roughly a century ago and has lived there ever since. Her relatives are involved to such an extent in local organizations, social clubs, and volunteer groups that, she said, taking a walk in nearby Altadena often means being waved down by somebody who recognizes her mom. But the Eaton fire upended these customs and potentially put their future in jeopardy when it erupted in Altadena on January 7th, fueled by an extreme windstorm that sparked several wildfires at once in different parts of Los Angeles and adjacent counties. The deadly blaze spread quickly over some 14,000 acres and left a trail of charred debris in its wake. Vast swaths of Altadena, a historically black enclave, were ravaged, scorching the region's infrastructure along with its rich cultural record. Open quote. Altadena represented prosperity. It
Mm,
represented joy. It represented unity and black excellence. And for all that to burn to pieces, it's just absolutely devastating, close quote, said Richard Craven. She said, it's like if a history book just lit on fire. Isn't that amazing?
that
So,
is.
and she said, this is a history that's deep. So, Altadena is just north of Pasadena in the San Gabriel
Mhm.
foothills and was long considered a haven for Black families who began settling there at the turn of the 20th century and continued trickling in as the years ensued. Some had escaped segregation in the South and took refuge in a place that did not subscribe to
Mm.
racist criteria of the area for land ownership. Yeah, so this was even an anomaly in California because they didn't have redlining in that community. They were allowed to purchase property, and that was rare in the 1900s. So Altadena established a foundation for entrepreneurship and generational wealth that eventually underpinned the development of Altadena into a diverse and vibrant suburb filled with close-knit companies. Uh,
Mm.
she told CBS News that she's among the legacy residents who've come to call its iconic Old Town District by the nickname DNA. They call it DNA. Boy, boy,
Ah,
boy. So it goes on and on and on. But that's just an interesting story and one that I'm watching. And it's heartbreaking to see that experience. So the question is, what's going to happen? One of the things that I heard on the news was Trump people saying that when they get in office, the help for California should come with strings attached. And so that should raise flags immediately, because in the past, 4 years under the Biden administration, we saw time and time again President Biden and Vice President Harris responding to natural disasters by saying to the people who were affected that we treasure, we value, and the full faith and credit, the full resources of America, of the United States, will be at your disposal so that you will be restored and can be restored, that your life is important. And here we are with the new administration about to come online, before it comes online, saying that, oh, help should have strings attached. That's frightening. That's frightening. What are we going to do?
Well, that's a hard question, because that feeling of helplessness comes back, and anger and rage and loss. And so I hear the affluence that was so perilously gained being marginalized and minimized to ashes. And this idea of strings attached to help tells me it's not help.
Mm-hmm.
And because when people need help, they don't have a string, they don't have nothing to give you, so you don't need to attach any string because they don't have one to attach it to. So that's meaning me they're up to, that tells me they're not up to any good. That is not the plan, and it's not humane. And one of the other parts that hit me when I think about the new administration and their plan to deal with disasters is that they don't know. I would just say this: as many times as Donald Trump has been bailed out due to his bankruptcies and no strings attached to them, he was over and over able to do it again and again. We need to be very, very aware of what's happening to our brothers and sisters, especially in California. And what we need to do as a Black community is not put them in a position that all of their help has to come from one place. Mm-hmm. That if all of us contributed enough, mm-hmm. they could build back better. That was Joe Biden's thing. They could build back better without being obliging or obligated to someone who doesn't have their best interest at heart. So I believe that's what we could do. And whether we'll do it, whether we stand up to that challenge, that's going to take some doing. Mm-hmm. And it means that we can't wait for other people to do it. Each of us has to take responsibility for our brothers and sisters out there. We have to donate. We not have to be the ones who do the rolling up our sleeves and going there to help.
I saw another article here from the LA Times that is written by its food editor, Danielle Dorsey. She's assistant food editor. And the story includes online photography by Jason Armand. It's a good read. I kind of skimmed it, but it shows a brother standing in the middle of a burnt up restaurant. The headline says the destruction of Altadena reverberates across Black Los Angeles. And it starts with kind of a pull quote, and with 3 bullets. One bullet says, quote, "I said to myself, you'll probably be all right. We're in America." The next bullet point says, "What us Pasadenans and Altadenans are about is doing what we need to do for each other." And the third one is, "We're not going anywhere." That all speaks to that resilience you're talking about. I'll read a part of the story. Again, this is the Los Angeles Times. And I think it's yesterday, January 16th in the morning that they published this story. Unable to sleep around 2 a.m. last Wednesday, Sean St. John got out of bed and drove from his Pasadena home to check on his Altadena Pizzeria, Pizza of Venice. He'd just been at the restaurant at around 9 p.m. when the Eaton Canyon flames were visible in the mountains, but still seemed a fair distance away. I hike these mountains a lot, so I kind of know, said St. John, who's a co-owner. I said to myself, you'll probably be all right. When he reached the restaurant in those early hours, he was so confident he would be safe from the fires. He took a lemonade and a brownie on his way, but none of, but he, uh, on his way, he was so confident he took a lemonade and a brownie on his way out, but none of the art on the walls, St. John said. I thought it was I thought about it and I was like, that fire's never getting here. They're never going to let Altadena burn down. Boy. And then, a number of great photographs here. It goes on to say on Saturday morning, St. John returned to the site of the Fair Oaks Avenue Pizzeria, its street facing sign serving as its only identification among fallen string lights, exposed brick pillars, and piles of charred rubble. A lingering scent of smoke clung to the air, and snowflakes of ash fluttered down from the sky. St. John rummaged with his bare hands through the broken beams and burnt kitchen appliances, hopeful he'd be able to salvage something to remember the pizzeria as it once was. He found nothing. He compared the sensation of witnessing the destruction of Altadena to when he heard about a close friend being shot and killed, but not believing it until seeing the body himself. I felt the same way about this, I had to come and see, and I still can't believe it. The loss of Pizza Venice to Eaton Fire is one tile in a new shattered mosaic, a topography of Black-owned homes and businesses with a reach that extends far beyond the Altadena hillside community to represent a core pillar of in the geography of Black LA. Many Black Angelenos in other cities or neighborhoods have personal connections to the unincorporated mountain town, from visiting grandmothers or cousins or spending childhoods there. In the hours and days since the start of the fire, Black Angelenos immediately came together to organize for Altadena, activating mutual aid networks. That's what you're talking about, Dr. B. St. John opened Pizza of Venice with Jamie Woolner in 2013, cooking pizza out of a convection oven with just 2 tables and 6 chairs. Over the years, the pair doubled the seating, bought a pizza oven, obtained a beer and wine license, and began making dough and curing meats in-house. He estimates that last month was their most profitable to date. We had a wide, diverse customer base because we were in the middle of Altadena, St. John said, and the locals here embraced us. The shock that just occurred, not to him, but the entire Altadena community, has still not fully settled in him. It goes on. It's a story that's worth reading, and it's in yesterday's LA Times. It's online. So that shock. And he talked about the spirit, though, that we're not going anywhere. We're gonna be okay at one level. He's saying, I think, he says what Pasadenians and Altadenans are about is doing what we need for one another. So I'm going to ask you to talk about that. What is it that we need to do for one another? And how do we get to where we say and declare to ourselves in the world, we're not going anywhere?
I love it. I love that. So that then is one of the tenets of this process that we've mentioned before, traumatic growth. Traumatic growth means one learns from a trauma and one is like reborn, like a phoenix in ashes. And traumatic growth means you use that to rebuild, but do it better. The traumatic growth symptoms are those you just described. One experiences an unbearable trauma. Then they make sense of it. And the making sense is this is a chance to do it again, to start over, to strengthen our neighborhood, to strengthen our future, and not forget our past. And I would say that when I hear that, my heart breaks because that's a lot of work. And no cake can ever be rebuilt exactly as it was, but they can change. They can look for old photographs of the place. They may have to put those on the wall as they rebuild. They may have to build new ones and consign various artists or ask them to make new contributions. And this time, have an evacuation plan. Although you may not ever have thought you needed one, now maybe in our communities, we'll think twice about what is it I cherish the most. And even with me, seeing them in California made me think about and empathize. If I had to get out of my house right now, what is it I want to take? What is it that I would be devastated to lose and leave behind? And I thought about my wedding pictures, and I thought about things that, you know, they're not replaceable to me. So now I'm in the process, which I hope in the future of all of us would do. I'm in the process of trying to digitize them in case something ever happens to me. They can be in the sky. It can be in the web or wherever.
In the cloud, yeah.
Thank you. Not the sky, the web, in the sky, so the cloud. And I think that as they rebuild now, they know. They know something they didn't know before. And now rebuilding is a call to all of us, whether we live there or not, to contribute to the regrowth of that special place. And so now is the time for us to not just wait to be asked, ask how can I help? And do it. Not just lip service. I love how people say, I pray for you. And I tell you, I've been praying every day for the people in California. But faith without acts is dead. So we have to do something to support them. And so I think when I hear articles like that, it makes me look for in that article for responsible journalism. So in the bottom, it can say how to contribute or what do they need. And I think that when it doesn't show that, it's the onus on us is to call. What can we do? How can we help them? And to gather our strengths and our resources and let them know they're not standing alone. And that resilient cry of defiance, we're back. We're not going anywhere. That's so encouraging. And I believe they're not. You know, I don't know what else is going to happen to the rest of the block, but that's one place on the block that's not going anywhere. Because, you know, all of us will see to it.
So I want to tie this back. We've got just a couple of minutes left to the statement I made earlier about whether what lies ahead for us as a community. You know, before the election, people were saying that the MAGA right people were poised for not an insurrection as they tried, 4 years ago, but an actual war, a rebellion. And there was talk in the neighborhood on the street level about if they felt like, they didn't win the election, that they were going to take arms. And so, I think people were wise to not, over, what do you call it, to get overworked up about that. But you had to at least know that that conversation was out there. And I think everybody has to also be grateful and sort of proud at the dignity and decorum that the Biden administration represented and is representing in ensuring the peaceful transfer of power. That's what it's all about, right? So they're saying, if we didn't win, we didn't win, but there's a process here that's more important than my win or my loss. And that's the continuity of the spirit, the notion, the possibility of democracy and the freedom of the people and the power of the vote.
That's right.
So all that is happening. On the one side, we're not demanding, but acting in ways that reflect our belief in the sanctity of democracy and of the vote. On the other side are people, from our point of view, that felt like, they were willing to torch the whole thing if they didn't get their way. So they got their way. The question is now what? What do we have to be mindful of? And we can't be paranoid, but we got to be aware. What do you think? Got about a minute, Dr. B.
Wow, that's a heavy minute, but I can tell you straight up, there's a lot that we can do. And the first thing we can do is get civically engaged, like the sister was saying earlier. The second thing we can do is make sure we start saving our money and we are very prudent in how we spend it. Don't waste money. Try to save it because you may need it for whatever reason. The third thing that may happen is try to build more networks of friends and family that can support each other. The fourth, boy, when you brought that up, my brother, I started thinking, the fifth thing that we can do as a Black community is to remember to bind together, to bind together, and that we have the power to run for things. We have the power to vote. We have the power to repair. And so that's where I am with that. And it's a lot more we can say, but we're out of time today at our Healing Circle.
Thank you, Dr. B. Thank you, Michelle, too, for your supporting us and comments. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane, the Healing Circle for Dr. B and me. Thank you. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Yep.